Good afternoon and welcome to the meeting point on Delta Television. I am Michael Ikeogwu. The meeting point is a program designed where we discuss issues towards furthering development. And today's topic is Delta 2023, the search for credible leadership. We have in the studio a man that would take the lead in discussing this issue today. He is the immediate past chief of staff to Governor Ifeanyi Okowa, several times Commissioner for Finance, Delta State, a development finance expert, former principal secretary to the President of Federal Republic of Nigeria, late President Umaru Musa Yar'Adua, a frontline governorship aspirant in Delta State under the platform of the People's Democratic Party. Is no other person than Olorogun David Edevbie. Olorogun, you are welcome to the studio.
Yeah, good afternoon, Michael.
My pleasure. There is no gainsaying the fact that the electionary process towards choosing leaders at various levels for the 2023 election has taken the center stage. And today, we'll have you here to, lend your voice in some of the issues we are going to discuss today. Sir, you have been on ground since 1999, when the present democracy was bettered. How do you describe democracy in the last, from 1999 today?
Very good question. It actually describes a period, or the period when I came into the country. I was in the UK working in the private sector before I was invited to join the government by Chief Onani February. How would I describe it? I think what's happened to date is not surprising. We've been through ups and downs, but when you look at our democracy compared to other democracies, we're still very much in the infant stage. If you look at democracy in the United States, for example, they've been operating it since the 1630s, over 400 years. And even then, they're still evolving as a democracy. And I think that's what's happening here. We're evolving as a democracy. The truth of the matter is, I think it was Olufalaye that said it, mentioned it at some point. He said, what happened was a transition from military rule to civilian rule, and not really from military rule to democracy. They're two different things. And the reason why I remember that was, if you recall, the Constitution which we had, which we still operate, was given to us by the military. And so therefore, you can't expect to have a perfect democracy arising from such a beginning in my books. I only think now we're starting to contend with the actual issues of democracy. And I think a lot of people in Nigeria kind of looked at democracy as a destination, and that's incorrect. Democracy is a journey. It's not a destination, and we've just begun the journey. And we've had some significant developments during that journey. We've had a transition in terms of presidency and rulership from one part of the country to the other part of the country, a peaceful transition. We've had a transition from one party to another party. All these are parts of the steps that you take in a democratic journey. I think we've done pretty well under the circumstances. I think a lot of people forget what it was like in 1999. I remember because I came back into the country. And prior to coming back to the country, I'd worked in foreign countries. And I'd actually worked in war zones, places like Somalia, etc. I'd actually worked there. And when I arrived at Murtala Mohammed Airport and drove into the country, so to speak, it was like a war zone. Most people didn't realize it. It was like a war zone. If we look at Delta, when we first arrived in 1999 in Delta, You know, I remember when we were sworn in and we were asked to go to, I mean, after the swearing in, most people had some form of celebration or the other. I didn't. I went straight to my office because I didn't really know anyone at the time. And I remember walking into the office. There was no power supply. I asked the secretary if there was a telephone. She looked at me like, no, there's never been a telephone in this building. And I remember sitting in my office and looking at the pictures of the previous commissioners and almost asking them, how did you do your work? How did you work? No phone, no electricity, no water, nothing. But look at the situation today. So there has been a massive change in the country over the years. There's been a massive change in 22 decades or so. And we're only now beginning to contend with the true issues of democracy. And that's why restructuring are now taking center stage. We're still testing the law on some issues. We're still testing the law. So I think, to summarize it, I think we've done pretty well as a nation. We've moved from military rule to civilian rule, and I think we're now beginning to transit into a democracy. And all the questions that needs to when it comes to a democracy, individual civil liberties, civil rights, women's rights, civil liberal organizations, etc., institutions, all those things, those questions are now being asked. And I think we will continue to evolve as a nation and as a people. And our democracy will tend to strengthen and get deeper as we move along in the process.
Okay. We have on sound observation that you are aspiring for the #1 seat in Delta State.
Then before we get to that one, let me take this one.
Okay.
Having been in government for several years, what is your assessment of the development and growth of the state today? I mean Delta State.
Well, I think a lot has happened in Delta State. I think this question is almost tied to the previous question from a general perspective. There has been a lot of development in Delta State, starting from, like I said, the situation we inherited in 1999. I think what happened was, as we came in 1999, let's take it by each governor. Chief James Onanife Ibori, it was almost ground zero. If we need to go back a little bit again in history, the state had just been formed effectively. It was formed in 1991. And between 1991 and 1999, it was under military regime. Little or nothing was done. And because we had just been formed as a state, there was very little infrastructure, very little public structure in place in Delta. That's the situation we inherited in 1999. And I think James Onanife Ibori recognized that, and we started to lay down the foundations, the basic foundations, in terms of governance structure, etc. And the emphasis at that time was, if you may recall, the emphasis at that time, because we looked at the state. We had a development plan which we put in place. We got some Lebanese and local people to put in place a plan. And one thing became clear. Over 50% of the state is riverine. Most people don't know that. Over 50% is riverine. And they were disconnected from the upland, effectively. And so the first thing he did was, in terms of laying down infrastructure, was to try and connect them to the mainland. And that's what gave rise to the Omadino Bridge. That's what gave rise to the Bomadi Bridge over the Forcados River. And I believe the other one was the Abo Bridge over the Ase River. Those were the first significant steps that were taken in order to try and connect the riverine area to the mainland area. Then obviously there was focus on rural electricity and on roads. His Excellency Dr. Olorogun came in and built upon that. his emphasis. He did all the usual things one would expect as a government, but he also had the foresight to recognize the fact that we needed to start looking at Delta beyond oil. And he started the push. He started, obviously, infrastructure-wise, he started with, some major infrastructure facilities, like the Asaba airport was under him, and that's why we have it now. And then Delta beyond oil. And then the current situation we're in, or the current governor, has built upon that, and he has done so well. In terms of infrastructure. He's called the roadmaster. I have to say, in all of those cases, I've been involved in one form or another. But I think there's still a lot more work to be done. It's a work in progress. Yeah. That's the best way to describe it. There's Asaba, as Asaba Capital Territory, needs further work in order to bring it up to the standard that we've seen in other parts of the country. You also know that Delta is not a one-city state. We have several cities. Those cities also need to be developed in order to reduce the urban migration that is going on.
Can you take the
Okay.
question?
You said work in progress. And you've been in government since 1999. How will you assess your contribution thus far to the government?
Well, to be honest with you, assessment has to be done by my superiors. There's self-assessment and the assessment done by my bosses. But I think if you look at my trajectory, I think you said it. You said I was Commissioner of Finance several times. Yes. I think I'm the longest-serving Commissioner of Finance there has been in the country so far. I don't think Chief James Onanife-Ibori would have appointed me Commissioner of Finance twice. I don't think the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria would have appointed me as his principal secretary to take over from his outgoing Chief of Staff. I don't think I would have come back to Delta State and be appointed again as Commissioner of Finance for the third time, and then subsequently Chief of Staff if I wasn't doing something right. So if you look at I think I've done pretty well in the public space. And if you look at a number of things that I've done, starting from when I was first Commissioner of Finance, we were the first state in the country to publish our audited accounts. We were the first state in the country to pay, you guys may not be old enough to remember the minimum wage of 7,500 in 2000. We were the first state to introduce the cash budget system. We were the first state to introduce a computerized management system in terms of SFA. And we were first in so many other things. So I think in general I've done pretty well. That's it within the state. There are also things that I've done at the federal level. I fought for 13% derivation, which was given to us, and so many other things. I'm sure you've seen what's happening with amnesty. That, again, was one of the things that was introduced by me. So I think I've done pretty well, and there's still a lot more to do.
Thank you very much, sir. We have one sound observation that you are aspiring for the #1 seat in Delta State. What would you say is has inspired you to take this step towards occupying the #1 seat?
Well, I haven't actually taken the step. I mean, what I've done is I'm consulting. I'm consulting widely, and quite frankly, what's happening is it is more the public. A lot of people from the public want me to run, and I'm seriously considering it. Why would I consider it? I think it's self-explanatory. I have served, in effect, or I've served or worked with the three previous governors. I've been involved in all their plans and successes at one stage or another. I funded most of them. So I have a deep understanding of the challenges that face the state. And I clearly have the educational background. I clearly have the experience. I don't think I'm second to none in any of those fields. And I think we are at a stage in this country where we need someone who has the experience, who has the knowledge, because we are at a stage where the country is facing enormous financial challenges. And if we don't get it right, I don't know where we'll end up. And you have someone who already has the experience, who already has the knowledge, and who has the financial expertise. Because at the end of the day, government is about the management of resources, and I'm an expert in managing resources.
As a frontline governorship aspirant of the party ticket of your party.
He says he's consulting.
Yes.
By the time you finish consultation,
No, but he's still frontline. So
like I said that ticket in Delta State under the, your party, what would you say is your vision on economic development of the state? Vision economy.
Well, my vision is shaped by the problems that exist. Epileptic power supply. We all know that that is a major problem. High unemployment, that's a major problem. We have insecurity, that's a major problem. And the list goes on and on and on. We've done well to date, but we need somebody who knows the history of how we achieved what we've achieved to date and can immediately hit the ground running in taking us to the next level. And that's where my vision comes in. My vision is very simple, the modernization of Delta State. Some people have asked, what do you mean by that? It's very simple. We need to go from a system we inherited, from the colonial masters. We need to go from that system into a more modern system, a current day system, which is based on value added. It's based on industrialization. The economy is knowledge based. That is my vision for the development of Delta State. And it's based on a number of key drivers. I will just mention what they are. The first is energy. In my opinion, if we don't sort out our energy problem, everything else we're doing is going to be a waste of time. You need to get your power sorted because that is the driver of everything. And I have a plan to do that, and that is very simple. I intend to build a 500 megawatt power plant as soon as and it can be done within 3 years if you know what you're doing. And that's what I used to do. I've done it across the world. I've even done it in Delta. We have an 8.7, I think it's 8.5 megawatt power plant in Asaba already. I was the chairman of the committee. So it's not like it can't be done. It's just that it will be done on a much larger scale. The power from will meet all our needs, and the surplus will be sold to the energy grid or BEDC. Now, most people don't realize we already own about 15% of the equity in BEDC. I don't know if you're aware of that. You are a part owner of BEDC. So I've had discussions with them, and it will be seamless. In terms of providing the power and then accepting the power if we go that way. So energy is the first thing I feel that needs to be sorted. The next thing is security. Without security, I'm afraid no investor will come into your state, whether domestic or foreign. That is an issue that needs to be addressed. And there are two approaches in my mind to addressing the security problem. His Excellency Dr. Ifeanyi Okowa has already laid the foundation, and that involves improving the security architecture. I just want to build upon that and focus more on how I can relate with the federal government. The second step of it is also the funding. Again, His Excellency Governor Okowa has done a great deal in that field. I'm just looking to upgrade that, and that's why you have the Security Trust Fund. That provides the funding of the security architecture that you have in place. I need far more funding, working with the private sector. I think once we have that in place, I don't see, and we sort out the energy problems, I don't see any reasons why we can't deploy things, modern technology in helping to combat crime. Things like CCTVs, drones, they don't cost that much any longer. Those are things that we can deploy in flashpoints to help us with our security challenges. The other area that I think would need to be addressed, obviously, is the law. We need to take a look at our laws, revamp those laws to give them more teeth and more bite. I think the combination of those are the short-term measures that one can put in place. The long-term measure is industrialization, which I'll come to later on. Once you have industrialization in place, I believe it will mop up unemployment, which is part of the problem of security that we have, especially amongst the youth. The next driver is job security, wealth and job creation. That's a driver. We need to focus on job and wealth creation. Now, that covers a gamut of areas, but I would start. We have an excellent Chief Job Creations Office that exists already. I was part of the process, and they're doing an excellent job, and that's where all the other things come from in terms of graduate development schemes, etc., GIF, YAGED, all those things. I would like to continue with that, and if possible, increase the scope of that. Then the next is microcredit schemes. Everybody knows, and I'm an economist, everybody knows that the private sector is the engine of economic growth. And within the private sector is small businesses that actually drive employment. So I'd like to spend a lot more in that avenue, in that area, to focus on, and therefore provide credits to small and medium-scale enterprises. Those are the things I would like to look at when it comes to job creation. There are other areas like agriculture. That's part of wealth and job creations. If you invest in agriculture, but my emphasis would be to bring in the private sector, not to try and do it as a government, because government has no business being in business. We know that, certainly not in agriculture. So therefore, there are a lot of opportunities there. We could, by some estimates, we could be yielding or generating about $10 billion worth of agricultural produce if we did the right thing in terms of large scale mixed with small scale holders, etc. So that's another area in terms of job and wealth creation. There's also this, creativity. You've got the film village there. That's another area that we could take a look at. I've spoken to the likes of Netflix. They would be interested. His Excellency has built, is building in the process. It will soon be finished. A film village that will provide an avenue for creativity, and again that will create jobs, because in the process of making films and other things, working with the likes of Netflix, we could be increasing the amount of revenue we generate from that. There are a lot more other areas under wealth and job creation, but that's just a summary of it. The next area would be social infrastructure. And we all know about roads and other infrastructures that are required in the state. But I don't look at it from the perspective of roads. We've done so well. The last three governors have done very well, particularly the current governor when it comes to road and infrastructure. It's a work in progress. There's more infrastructure that is required. But I look at it from the perspective, I want to take a different perspective, and that is look at it from an intermodal transportation system. Put in place a transportation plan. Once you have a transportation master plan, it doesn't just limit you to roads. It will be roads, bridges, railway, airports, etc. And very important, the riverine areas. And once you connect all together, you will then have an integrated transportation system. Again, that is part of the development of social infrastructure. There are other things, for example, education. We all know what needs to be done there. But my perspective for education is to tie the education we're talking about. It doesn't make sense to continue to produce graduates when there are no jobs for the graduates to go into. It doesn't make sense. So there must be more discussion between the private sector, industry, and the universities, so that the universities are producing the graduates that feed into the private sector, feed into the industries. That's the perspective I would want to take when it comes to social infrastructure. Health. Well, let me come back to education. Some specific things I'd like to see done. Continue with free education. There's no doubt about that. But at the university level, we must continue with bursaries. But in addition to that, I believe student loans should be provided to those who require it. And that's a commitment that I'm making, that if I become governor, I will provide student loans to those who require it. And the details of it will work out. Now, health. Simplest terms, I want to look at it from the perspective of how do we improve our life expectancy. At the moment, it's about 54, I believe. I'd like to increase life expectancy from 54 to 70, and that can be done in 8 years. That can actually be achieved. And I've looked at studies, it can be done, and then everything that is required to do so can be done in order to facilitate that. And then the final part of the jigsaw puzzle, from my perspective, I'm summarizing, by the way. All of this is in my manifesto. If is interested can go online. It's there. It's a full detailed manifesto of all my plans. The final one is, which concerns you, is public sector reform. In order to achieve all the things that I'm talking about, there must be reform of the public sector. We can't carry on the way we're doing. We must have a public sector that is able to deliver on all the demands and requests that we have in mind. So within the first first 100 days, I'd like a situation whereby we do a best value review of the public sector and to change the public sector, not very much, but to change it so that it becomes more dynamic, it's more based on IT, etc., in order to produce better services for the people. Again, in terms of public sector reform, looking at the executive, I think we need to have a government that is reflective of the people being governed. I don't think it's right to have a population where over 50% of the population is women. They are women. But when it comes to governance, you just see a token or handful of women. That's not right. If you really want to have a system that works, you have to have a governance system that reflects the people being governed. And that is why I committed to saying that at least 35% of all political appointments will be given to women, reserved for women. The same applies to youth. I think it is, again, you may not be aware, we are one of the youngest populations in the world. If you look at our population demographics, over 75% of our population is under 35 years old. What that tells you, and I think we also are during NSARS, we are in a minority. We have to have a governance structure that reflects them. So again, I have already committed in my manifesto to reserve 25% of all political appointments for youths. And there's a reason for doing that. I was brought into government as a youth, and that's why I can sit here and boast of all the experience that I have. And that is because somebody saw it fit to think ahead and do so. But I'm one of very few in Delta. I'd like to have a situation where when the time comes for governors, there are 3, 4, 5, 6 credible people that can turn up with the knowledge and experience that one would expect, so people have genuine choice. The third thing in terms of public sector reform that I'd like to mention is I think it's wrong for people to work 35 years of their life and don't get paid their pension, and people die while waiting for their pension. And the first thing I intend to do is to look at the contributory pension scheme. I know we owe about 70 billion. Please, it may not be correct. As of when I left government, it was about 70 billion. 70 billion owed by both the local government, which owes the majority, which is not the state government, and some is owed by the state government. What I undertake to do if I become governor is to repay the whole amount within 1 year, so that we have a situation that where people work and retire, they get what is due to them. Now, all of this, as far as I'm concerned, we must have a situation where all of this is packaged and passed. We put it in a development plan, and that development plan must then be approved by the House of Assembly. So it becomes a law. So everybody then knows what the development plan of Delta State is for the next 20 years. And then we will then end up in a situation where, like Lagos State has been following a development plan since 1999. What people don't realize is that we had a plan before Lagos State. We had a plan before Lagos State, but Lagos State has continued to follow their plan, and that is why they are where they are. We need to put that plan in place, and it needs to be approved so that everybody has a clear understanding of where we're going. You can't embark on a journey without knowing where you're going. Thank you. I'm only stopping because I think I've run out of time.
No, we still have time. We have enough time. But let's go to the next question. You have been in governance for quite a good number of years, and with your experience, you should be able to know what each senatorial district wants in terms of development. Can you highlight some of the things you observed that each senatorial district wants in terms of development?
I think what you mean, I think all senatorial districts want development. They want roads, they want schools, they want all. There's no senatorial district that has everything. They all want the same thing. I think what you're referring to is the peculiar request, and that is a reflection of the different terrains. Let's start with the South-South. I mean the Delta South senatorial district. It's largely riverine, if I'm correct. It's largely riverine. And the major problem we've had in Delta South is majority of it is riverine. There's a lot of oil production obviously occurred there, and so therefore anything to do with oil production has been a bit of a problem in the riverine areas. Secondly, the major issue is because it's riverine, it costs a lot more money to develop. But like I said, if you have a development plan in place, like we did in 1999, we would have, and we followed it, I think by now we would have done a lot more in the riverine area. I think so for specifically, they need all the basic things, and I undertake to, if we really want to have a state where everybody has and feels an equal part of, we must spend more emphasis on the riverine area. For example, Bring Back Warri. That's an initiative that everybody, some people are aware of, and the aim of that is to try and improve job creation, improve the economy of that area. And so that's something that, initiatives like that are things that I'd like to pursue. The other thing I'd like to pursue is the Warri Port. I think the people around Warri and its area and that area are concerned that that port continues to operate suboptimally. If it operates optimally, the multiplier effects of it will be significant. So that access, that definitely. Now, if we look at the Ijaw area, so to speak, everything to do with development is required in those areas, without a doubt. And that is because it's a difficult terrain. But if we spend the money we need to spend within 20 years, there's no reason why the place can't, and especially if you're working with the private sector, there's no reason why we can't have it looking much better than it is today, more like a Dubai, more like a Miami. There's no reason why we can't have it. But in terms of specific, I've been consulting and going around. One of the things that they keep raising constantly is the need for a higher institution in the Ijaw area. Apparently there isn't. So I think we will need to look at the finances of the state at the time, whether it does justify another higher institution. But in the short term, what we could do is look at the existing, the School of Marine Technology in Brutu. If we spend more money there, I think that will bring some succor to the people in that area, especially with respect to higher institutions. If we look at, the same applies to the College of Engineering in the Obieh campus of the Delta State University. I think if we spent more money there and upgraded it, that will also satisfy a lot of people with respect to higher education. So I think that addresses Delta South. Yes. Let's come to Delta Central, where I'm from. I'm old enough to know that it was once the industrial hub of Delta State. Delta Central, there were so many businesses which then created employment, but they're all gone. They're all gone now. And so I think there needs to be focus on industrialization. But before we can move forward with the industrialization, of course, we must address the energy issue. And like I said, we first address it in the Ogara JC Saple axis, and then you come down to the Ugeli Udu axis. I think once we address the power situation, we address the security situation, government will be able to attract the private sector into industries in those areas. And if necessary, government can take equity in order to bring in those industries so that they can create jobs. And then, of course, we have Abraka. Abraka is already there. Abraka can be a developmental hub for us in Delta Central. We already have people there. All we need to do is to find a way of bringing industries that can then take the feed from the universities into them in order to have a synergy between industry and the university. But in the 25 local government areas, I think ICT, if we have ICT backbones to all the 25 local government areas, that will provide a platform in developing ICT across the state. That is an area, like I said, knowledge-based economy. Whether you like it or not, if you either promote it as a government or you don't, a lot of people don't realize that it is already happening anyway. I come from Ughelli. You may not know that NSAR started in Ughelli. You know who it started with. I don't want to go, but so why not formalize what already exists? Why not channel the knowledge and expertise of these young men into profitable businesses? It can be done. It just requires governments to provide the enabling environment to allow it to happen. Then Delta North. Delta North has, I'm sure you know, it has riverine areas, and then it has the upland. And in the riverine areas has the same problems as the riverine areas elsewhere. But upland, we have erosion. Erosion is a major issue in Delta North and needs to be tackled and addressed. Also, the issue of industry is something that is also required in Delta North. Luckily, Delta North is peaceful, you know, so I would see it as quite easy to attract businesses. I would start personally by breathing life into the Kwale Industrial Park. I would start by breathing life into the Asaba Industrial Park. You know there's an industrial park in Asaba, but it hasn't been functional. I would want to breathe life there, but because of its proximity to the airport, that is a very quick win. And then there are several other industrial parks that have been created by His Excellency that I would like to continue to pursue. So I think those generally address the various senatorial districts. The final thing in the Delta North, of course, is Asaba. We need a master plan for Asaba. We need to develop Asaba. As I mentioned earlier, there needs to be a master plan. I don't see any reason why we can't have an inner rail network within Asaba. But again, those are things. So I hope I've covered the three senatorial districts. I hope I've covered your own very well.
Yes.
I want to.
That's a question I need to ask.
Please.
Based on this, your laudable project you have in mind, sir, considering the multiple situation of Delta State, multi-ethnic group we have in Delta State, there are so many settlements. These settlements, how will you face them? The ethnic issues, how will you be able to align them together because of this your project, in line with this your senatorial distributions?
Well, as I said before, first of all, we shouldn't look at the fact that because we have a multi-ethnic society as a disadvantage. I actually see it as an advantage. The truth of the matter, yes, we are multi-ethnic, but there's a lot of marriage in between. We're one people. And we need to start seeing ourselves more as one people. We need to stop doing things that promote ethnic sentiments as opposed to the sentiment of Deltans. And I think the younger people, the younger generation, tend to focus more towards that. They tend to move away from, they don't really care where you're from. What they want is they want jobs. They want education. They want good health. And so I don't see that to be that of a major challenge. Luckily, the three governors before me have instituted peace. We now have peace in our society generally. Like I mentioned before, if we have a developmental plan that is put on the table, that is debated and discussed by all ethnic groups, and it is clear what the development plan is for the next 20 years, everybody then knows where they fit in within the system. And as long as the revenue comes in and how we anticipate the revenue coming in, and everyone is treated fairly, I don't see that there being a problem when it comes to ethnicity. I think most of the time when we do have a problem, it is promoted by people who have an ethnic mindset. And they are the ones that create the problem. It's not, I think the average Deltan doesn't really care where you come from, or certainly the younger ones, they don't care. All they want is they want to have good services as a people.
Okay, sir, you have talked really, you have touched almost all the spheres of our developmental needs. But there is this particular aspect I want you to look into. The state is endowed with enormous mineral resources, but emphasis has been on the harnessing of oil resources while we leave other areas. Particularly, the gas deposit we have in Delta State is quite enormous. How do you intend to harness other natural resources that we have to make them, valuable to us and add value to our lives?
Well, very good question. First of all, you must understand the gas deposits here don't belong to Delta State. Let's be very clear on that. So we're like oil bearing, we're gas bearing. It belongs to the federal government. But having said that, I believe that and other minerals that we have in our state are things that we can attract people to come and take advantage of, businesses to come and take advantage of. And if necessary, the state government can take equity in companies, can do feasibility studies, take equity in companies that are interested in order to act as a catalyst to the development of all of this. We have to do it. We have to do it if we are going to get a situation where the private sector then becomes the engine of economic growth. We just have to do that. And the other thing we need to do, obviously, is create an enabling environment. And in order to create an enabling environment, you have to sort out your power supply. You have to sort out your security. Those are very basic. You have to sort out your infrastructure. Once these things are in place, private sector, and I've worked in the private sector, what they are interested in is making returns, making revenue. And once everything is in place, enables them to do that, trust me, they will come.
Okay, you have very much interest in providing electricity and security, which is the basic thing that we need for investors to come, because when there is security of lives and property, investors will come because they have the guarantee that their investment will not be vandalized or destroyed. But the present circumstance we find ourselves, do you think the conventional police alone will be able to handle our security situation, or there are other innovations we are going to bring that to complement the conventional security apparatus that we have presently?
Yeah, I believe I touched that earlier when I talked about security. And when I said what we require is a security system that is more locally controlled. Yes, we will relate with the federal government, but we need the security architecture itself to be under our control. And that covers from the standard police down to, what we have, they call them vigilantes groups. All of those are part of the security architecture that needs to be put in place. That combined with adequate funding, because that is the major drawback all the time when it comes to security. You can't have a situation where policemen are fueling their own cars. You can't have a situation where policemen are buying their own bullets. You can't have then you're not being serious. You also have to introduce information technology. All of these things that I've mentioned are actually being done by this government, of which I was a part of. They're actually being done already, and that is why infrastructure is being provided, etc., etc. The Security Trust Fund has been set up. All I need to do is to ramp it up and to put more money into it and lay more emphasis and attract more people from the private sector into it. We also have to get our communities involved in policing our communities, because if we don't do that, then we'll continue to have the problem we have. But I think it's the desire of everyone in the community to have better security. So we will get the support if we put the right architecture in place.
Ken?
Okay. Because now, as a frontline governorship aspirant in Delta State, will you be accessible to Delta?
First of all, I didn't know I was frontline. Thank you for saying I'm frontline. Well, you say, okay, you're just in a new politician now. You're changing your mind. Yes, I will be accessible. And you have to understand accessible to enable me to do the job that I'm appointed to do. I will be, of course, you have to be accessible. Otherwise, you will lose touch with the people you're supposed to be governing. There are many forms of interaction these days. Again, it has modernized. There are many forms of interaction. There's the physical meeting. There's less emphasis on physical meetings now. You know, because of COVID, COVID has made it clear. You don't need to sit in front of each other every day to get things done. There's the telephone, there are computers, there's Zoom meetings, then you also have things like, you have things like Facebook, you have social media, etc. That is where the world is moving to in terms of interaction. And that's the sort of interaction I would like to promote. But what matters the most is putting in place a system that allows the common man to have access to the people that are governing him. It's very important, because if you don't do that, how will I be held accountable by the people if they're not accessible to me? How will I know whether I'm doing the right thing if they're not accessible to me? So accessibility is the number one issue that must be. So I will be extremely accessible so that we continue to have continuous dialogue. There has to be continuous dialogue between the people that are governing and the people that are being governed. Because at the end of the day, it's for the people, by the people. And therefore, accessibility is key.
So when you were talking about 50% of our environment being riverine, which means there is enormous potentials in also all those areas. Mm-hmm. And you also made us to understand that in trying to connect the state, you make transportation that will cover both the riverine and the upland. Correct. What is your plan to transform our water resources into an economic value, that we also take some of our youth out of the street to work in those aquatic areas?
Thank you. Again, it was part of what I mentioned earlier, and that's why I think it's an opportunity for us. There's so much happening. For example, if you look at the riverine areas, there's no reason why we shouldn't be involved in things like fisheries, heavily involved in fisheries, and anything that involves the riverine area, so to speak. And it's just a matter of putting in place a master plan that captures all the potentials that exist, and then investing in all those potentials. I just see a river as just being another form of road, as far as I'm concerned. And you need to get on a boat, and it's the same thing as being in a car. So I think that's what we need to do. We need to move our mindset towards that, and then the potentials will be there. Some of the most beautiful cities in the world are in riverine areas, and the potentials are enormous in the riverine areas. But all we have to do is find a way of connecting them properly. Like I said, sometimes it may even be more efficient to move cargo by river than by road. It may be far more efficient. But first of all, you have to bring them in to make them feel that they are an equal partner in this state called Delta.
So we are getting signals that time is not on our side. But in your own concept, what is your definition of Delta Beyond Oil?
Delta Beyond Oil is very simple. As the name says, whether you like it or not, and this is a fact, by 2030, a lot of countries are going to start reducing the amount of oil they import. In fact, some have set deadlines in terms of introducing electric cars, etc., etc. So the prognosis for oil is actually quite bad, if you look at it. So therefore, we must find a way, because it's going to affect the whole country, and certainly it will affect us. We must move and start to invest in other areas outside oil. That's why my emphasis on industrialization, my emphasis on knowledge-based economy. Because even the largest producers of oil right now are moving that way. They're all moving that way. Places like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, it's clear what they're doing. They're taking the money from the oil and investing into other areas. That's what we need to do. So that by the time oil and gas and all those other things decline, we would have moved into a different trajectory. And definitely Delta will then be beyond the oil.
Okay, sir. Finally, what is your message to Delta as we wind up?
Well, my message to Delta is very clear. 2023 is a pivotal point. I think, we're all in this country, and perhaps, and this is what I meant by the development of democracy, and it comes from history and experience. I think perhaps a lot of people didn't think that experience mattered. A lot of people didn't think that educational qualifications mattered. But I've just told you, those are the, governance is about the management of resources. And the people who can manage these resources are those who have knowledge and experience in such areas. We've seen over the last 6 years, I don't want to go into the politics of it, but we've seen the consequences of it. So we need to make sure that in Delta State, we don't fall into that trap. Because if we fall into that trap, I don't know if we'll ever be able to extradite ourselves from it.
Thank you very much. Ken Obieh, I want to thank you for joining me to have this interview with Olorogun David Edevbie. Ken Obieh is of Minister of Information here in Asaba, and he's a journalist too. Then we have been with a frontline governorship aspirant of the People's Democratic Party, Olorogun David Edevbie. I want to thank you for coming to this program.
Thank you very much.
I am Michael Ikeogwu. Join us same time tomorrow.